There is a moment in every life when the noise fades, not because the world becomes quiet, but because you finally stop reaching outward for answers. 400 years ago, a swordsman reached that moment. His name was Miyamoto Musashi. Undefeated in over 60 duels, a strategist, artist, and wanderer who spent his life refining one question: what does it mean to live without dependence? Near the end of his life, alone in a cave, Musashi wrote a short text, not for students, not for followers, and not for fame. It was written for himself. 21 principles, no poetry, no comfort, no reassurance. He called it the way of walking alone. The Dokkodo is not about becoming cold or emotionless. It is about becoming unshakable. It asks you to stand without leaning on pleasure, without clinging to love, without resenting loss, without outsourcing your strength to beliefs, possessions, or hope. Musashi does not promise happiness. He does not offer motivation. He offers clarity. These principles are not rules to obey. They are mirrors. Each one strips away a layer of dependence until what remains is simple, direct, and sufficient. In this series, we will walk through all 21 principles of the Dokkodo, slowly, one by one, not as historical artifacts, but as living ideas. Ideas meant to be tested in your own life. No mysticism, no romanticizing the samurai, just the quiet discipline of self-mastery. Let us begin with the first principle, the foundation upon which all the others rest. Principle 1. Accept everything just the way it is. The first principle of the Dokkodo is deceptively simple. Accept everything just the way it is. At first glance, this sounds passive, almost like surrender. But Musashi did not mean resignation. He meant clarity. Acceptance in this sense is not saying, "I like this," or "this is fair." It is saying, "This is real." Most suffering does not come from events themselves. It comes from the constant argument we have with reality. We think, "This shouldn't have happened. They should have acted differently. I should be somewhere else by now." That resistance consumes energy. A swordsman who resists reality loses before the blade is drawn. Musashi understood this deeply. In combat, you do not argue with the opponent's strike. You do not complain about its speed or direction. You see it and you respond. Life is no different. Acceptance is the moment you stop fighting what already exists and reclaim the energy wasted on denial. This does not mean you become passive. It means you become precise. When you accept things as they are, your mind stops spinning stories. You no longer react emotionally first. You see the situation clearly, and only then do you act. There is a quiet strength in this. Acceptance removes shock. It removes bitterness. It removes the need to blame. And blame is one of the heaviest burdens a person can carry. Many people confuse acceptance with weakness because they fear it means giving up hope. But hope, when it depends on reality changing, is fragile. Musashi's path was different. He did not rely on hope. He relied on preparedness. Acceptance is what allows preparedness to exist. If you deny your circumstances, you cannot adapt to them. If you resent them, you cannot learn from them. If you fantasize about alternatives, you delay action. Acceptance brings you fully into the present moment, the only place where skill, judgment, and discipline can operate. This principle is especially difficult in modern life, We are constantly encouraged to believe that dissatisfaction is a sign of ambition, that resistance proves intelligence, that anger means awareness. But much of that is noise. Acceptance does not mean you stop improving your life. It means you stop fighting illusions. You accept your limitations so you can work within them. You accept your past so it no longer controls you. You accept loss so it does not turn into resentment. Musashi accepted isolation. He accepted hardship. He accepted impermanence. And from that acceptance came freedom. When you stop arguing with reality, you become lighter, more grounded, more effective. This is why Musashi places this principle first. Without acceptance, none of the others are possible. Detachment fails without acceptance. Discipline collapses without acceptance. Even honor becomes distorted without it. Acceptance is not the end of effort. It is the end of wasted effort. And from that stillness, the way begins to reveal itself.
Principle 2. Do not seek pleasure for its own sake. This principle often triggers resistance because pleasure at first glance feels harmless, even necessary. Food tastes good. Comfort feels safe. Distraction eases tension. Pleasure promises relief. So why would Musashi warn against seeking it? Because seeking pleasure is different from experiencing it. Pleasure becomes dangerous when it turns into a compass, when your decisions are guided by what feels good now rather than what strengthens you over time. Musashi lived in a world where a single moment of indulgence could dull the edge of awareness. But this principle is even more relevant today. Modern life is engineered around stimulation, endless entertainment, instant gratification, constant dopamine. And yet, despite more comfort than any generation before, people feel restless, distracted, and strangely empty. That is not an accident. Pleasure, when pursued for its own sake, trains the mind to avoid discomfort at all costs. And growth requires discomfort. Discipline requires friction. Clarity often emerges only after boredom, frustration, or restraint. Musashi is not saying pleasure is forbidden. He is saying it must not lead. When pleasure becomes the goal, discipline becomes optional. When discipline becomes optional, strength erodes quietly. The problem with pleasure is not excess alone, it is dependency. If you need pleasure to feel okay, you become predictable. If you avoid discomfort instinctively, you lose resilience. If you chase stimulation, stillness begins to feel unbearable. A warrior who needs comfort is already compromised. But this applies far beyond combat. If you only work when motivated, you become inconsistent. If you only reflect when calm, you avoid truth. If you only act when inspired, you delay your life. Musashi understood that a stable mind cannot be built on fluctuating sensations. Pleasure rises and falls, mood changes, desire fades. But the way requires continuity. This principle invites a subtle shift. Instead of asking, "What do I feel like doing?" you begin to ask, "What is required right now?" That question changes everything. You eat to nourish, not to indulge. You rest to recover, not to escape. You enjoy pleasure when it appears, without clinging to it. And when it disappears, you do not panic. This creates inner independence. You are no longer dragged by craving. You are no longer restless when stimulation is absent. You can sit in silence without reaching for something to fill the space. That ability is power. Not loud power, quiet power. The kind that allows you to stay steady while others chase relief. Musashi's life was harsh, but it was deliberate.
He chose difficulty not because he hated pleasure, but because he understood its cost. Pleasure weakens attention. Avoiding pleasure sharpens it. And attention, in the end, is what determines the quality of your actions. This principle does not ask you to become joyless. It asks you to become free. Free from craving, free from avoidance, free from the need to constantly feel good in order to function. When pleasure stops being your master, discipline becomes lighter, and the way becomes clearer.
Principle 3. Do not depend on a partial feeling. This principle is about clarity, about not mistaking a fragment of emotion for truth. A partial feeling is an incomplete signal, a momentary impulse, a passing mood, a surge of emotion that feels convincing but lacks depth. Anger that wants immediate release, excitement that promises more than it can deliver, fear that exaggerates danger, affection that has not yet been tested by time. Musashi warns against building your actions on these fragments, because feelings arise faster than understanding, and when action outruns clarity, regret often follows. A partial feeling feels urgent. It demands response. It pushes you to move before seeing the full picture. But urgency is not wisdom. In combat, reacting too early exposes you. In life, it does the same. Musashi trained himself to wait, not passively, but attentively, to let the first wave of emotion pass, to observe what remains once the noise settles. What remains is usually more accurate. This principle does not deny emotion. It denies emotional leadership. Feelings inform, they should not command. When you depend on partial feelings, your life becomes reactive. You say things you later wish you had held back. You make commitments you later resent. You withdraw when patience was needed. You rush when restraint would have served you better. Partial feelings create partial decisions, and partial decisions accumulate. Over time, they shape a life that feels unstable, not because circumstances are chaotic, but because your inner compass keeps shifting. Musashi sought a different foundation. He cultivated a whole mind, a mind that integrates feeling, reason, experience, and timing. This requires pause, not suppression, pause. The ability to notice an emotion without immediately acting on it. To say, I feel this, but I will not move yet. That pause is where mastery lives. Modern culture encourages the opposite. We are told to trust our gut instantly, to follow our feelings, to act quickly before doubt appears. But doubt is not always the enemy. Sometimes doubt is the signal that the picture is incomplete. A partial feeling is often loud. A whole understanding is usually quiet. This is why Musashi valued stillness. Stillness allows the mind to widen, to see consequences, to sense timing, to distinguish impulse from insight. When you act from a whole mind, your actions feel grounded even when they are difficult. You are less likely to apologize later, less likely to second-guess yourself, less likely to be pulled apart by conflicting emotions. This does not make you cold, it makes you coherent. Your thoughts align with your actions align with your values align with the way you have chosen. Depending on partial feelings fragments the self. Depending on clarity integrates it. Musashi knew that a warrior who is ruled by emotion can be manipulated by opponents, by circumstances, by inner chaos. But a warrior who observes emotion without obeying it becomes difficult to shake. This principle trains that steadiness. Feel fully, but move deliberately. Let emotions pass through you, not drive you. When action finally comes,
Let it arise from the whole of you, not a moment, not a mood, but a clear, unified mind. That is the way Musashi walked.
Principle 4. Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world. This principle cuts directly against how most people live. We are trained from early on to place ourselves at the center of everything. Our opinions, our feelings, our image, our story. And the more attention we give to ourselves, the heavier the self becomes. Musashi warns against this weight. To think lightly of yourself does not mean self-hatred. It does not mean lowering your worth. It means reducing obsession. The constant monitoring of how you appear, how you are judged, how things affect you personally. That obsession narrows perception. When the self becomes heavy, the world becomes small. Every inconvenience feels personal. Every disagreement feels like an attack. Every loss feels unbearable. Musashi chose the opposite orientation. He made the self small so the world could be seen clearly. To think deeply of the world is to study reality as it is, not as it relates to your ego. To notice patterns, to understand cause and effect, to see how people move, react, and repeat themselves. This is strategic awareness. In combat, a fighter who is overly focused on his own fear, pride, or technique misses the opponent. In life, a person overly focused on themselves misses opportunity, timing, and truth. Thinking lightly of yourself frees attention. You stop asking, "How does this make me look?" and start asking, "What is actually happening here?" That shift changes everything. You become less reactive, less defensive, less consumed by comparison. You listen better, you observe more accurately, you learn faster. Musashi understood that ego distorts perception. Pride makes you overestimate yourself. Insecurity makes you underestimate others. Both are forms of blindness. By lightening the self, you reduce distortion. You become harder to provoke, harder to manipulate, harder to destabilize. This does not make you passive, it makes you precise. A person who thinks deeply about the world understands timing, understands leverage, understands when to advance and when to wait. They are not rushed by emotion or validation. Modern life pushes us in the opposite direction. Social platforms reward ego. Outrage rewards identity. Becomes a performance. The result is exhaustion. When everything is about you, everything feels heavy. Musashi offers relief through discipline. Care less about how you are seen. Care more about how things work. Care less about defending an image. Care more about understanding reality. When the self becomes light, adaptability increases. You can admit mistakes without collapse. You can learn without humiliation. You can change direction without feeling lost. And when challenges arise, you respond instead of reacting. This principle is not about erasing yourself. It is about putting yourself in proper proportion. You are part of the world, not its center. When you see that clearly, clarity returns, and with clarity, the way becomes easier to walk. Principle 5. Be detached from desire your whole life. This principle is often misunderstood. Detachment does not mean rejection. It does not mean suppressing desire or pretending it does not exist. Musashi was not asking you to become numb. He was asking you to become free. Desire, when left unchecked, becomes a chain. It pulls attention outward. It makes peace conditional. It whispers that fulfillment lies just one step ahead, if only something changes. More success,
more recognition, more comfort, more certainty. And once one desire is satisfied, another replaces it. This cycle never ends. Musashi saw this clearly. A person ruled by desire is never fully present. They live slightly ahead of their own life, always leaning toward what is missing. Detachment breaks that forward-leaning posture. To be detached from desire does not mean you stop acting or striving. It means your inner stability no longer depends on outcomes. You still work, you still train, you still improve, but you are not internally owned by the result. This is critical. When desire controls you, fear follows closely behind. Fear of losing, fear of not getting, fear of falling behind, and fear clouds judgment. A detached mind sees more clearly. It can pursue goals without desperation. It can walk away without resentment. It can fail without collapse. Musashi lived simply, not because simplicity was virtuous, but because complexity creates attachment. The more you need, the more fragile you become. The more desires you carry, the more points life has to wound you. Detachment reduces vulnerability. This principle is lifelong because desire never disappears permanently. It changes form. In youth, desire seeks pleasure. Later, it seeks security, then recognition, then legacy. Musashi warns that no stage of life is immune. If you postpone detachment until later, it rarely arrives. Detachment must be practiced continuously. This does not make life dull. In fact, it often sharpens it. When desire loosens its grip, appreciation deepens. You enjoy things without clinging. You value people without owning them. You engage fully, but let go easily. This creates calm strength. A person who is detached cannot be easily manipulated, cannot be baited, cannot be rushed by craving. They move on their own timing. Modern culture thrives on the opposite. Advertising is built on stirring desire. Comparison amplifies it. Social pressure multiplies it. The result is constant dissatisfaction disguised as ambition. Musashi offers a quieter alternative. Want less, need less, and you will fear less. When desire no longer dictates your emotional state, your actions become cleaner. You choose because it is right, not because you are restless. You stop bargaining with life. And in that steadiness, discipline becomes natural. Detachment is not the absence of passion. It is the absence of dependency, and that distinction makes all the difference. This is why Musashi placed this principle early. Without detachment, the way bends around craving. With detachment, the way becomes straight.
Principle 6. Do not regret what you have done. Regret is one of the heaviest emotions a person can carry, not because it teaches nothing, but because most people never put it down. They replay moments endlessly. Different words, different choices, different timing. If only I had known, if only I had waited, if only I had acted sooner. Musashi rejected this way of living, not because mistakes do not matter, but because regret anchors the mind to what no longer exists. The past cannot be corrected, only understood. Regret feels responsible. It feels reflective, but more often it is disguised self-punishment, a way of clinging to an identity built around error. Musashi chose a harsher but cleaner path. He believed every action should be taken seriously, and once taken, released completely. When a decision is made with the best awareness available at the time, regret serves no further purpose. It drains energy that should be used for refinement. A warrior who regrets mid-fight hesitates. A person who regrets constantly
loses momentum. Regret fractures presence. Your body moves forward, but your mind remains behind. This creates inner division. Musashi valued unity, unity of mind and action, unity of intent and follow-through. Regret breaks that unity. This principle does not excuse carelessness, it demands responsibility. If you act thoughtlessly, you must correct your thinking. If you act wrongly, you must refine your judgment. But you do not emotionally relive the mistake. You extract the lesson and move on. This is difficult because regret often feels like moral proof, as if holding on to pain shows growth. But growth does not require suffering to linger. Growth requires adjustment. Musashi trained himself to view mistakes as information, cold, precise, useful. What failed? Why? What will change next time? Once those questions are answered, regret becomes unnecessary. Modern life encourages the opposite. We are taught to identify with our past, to label ourselves by mistakes, to rehearse guilt as identity. This weakens resolve. A person burdened by regret becomes cautious in the wrong way. They hesitate not because they are wise, but because they are afraid to repeat pain. Musashi preferred decisive movement, not reckless movement, decisive movement. When regret disappears, clarity returns. You become willing to act again, to commit fully, to accept consequences without emotional collapse. This creates resilience. It also creates honesty. Without regret, there is no need to lie to yourself about the past. You see it clearly, without distortion. Regret is attachment to an old self. Musashi cut that attachment. He understood that the person who acted then is not the person standing here now. Holding regret assumes nothing has changed, but the very fact that you see the mistake means you have already moved beyond it. So, let it go. Learn, refine, proceed. Do not carry yesterday into today. The way only moves forward.
Principle 7. Never be jealous. Jealousy is a quiet poison. It rarely announces itself openly. It disguises itself as comparison, as curiosity, as judgment. Why them and not me? Why now? Why easier for someone else? Musashi saw jealousy not as a moral flaw, but as a loss of direction. The moment you measure your life against another, you step off your own path. Jealousy assumes that life is a single race, one track, one finish line, one definition of success. But the way is not shared. Each person walks a different terrain with different limits, different timing, different burdens. To envy another is to ignore that reality. A warrior distracted by another fighter's reputation loses focus on the fight in front of him. In life, jealousy does the same. It pulls attention outward. It erodes gratitude. It replaces discipline with resentment. Worst of all, jealousy convinces you that someone else's gain is your loss. This is false. Another person's success does not subtract from your potential, but jealousy makes it feel that way. It narrows the mind. Instead of asking, "What can I refine?" you ask, "Why am I behind?" That question weakens resolve. Musashi valued self-comparison only. Who were you yesterday? Are you sharper today? That was enough. Jealousy also distorts perception. You see the outcome, but not the effort, the reward, but not the sacrifice, the public image, but not the private cost. You compare your struggle to someone else's highlight. This comparison is never fair and never useful. Musashi trained himself to observe others without attachment, to learn from them, not resent them. If someone was stronger, he studied why. If someone advanced faster, he examined how.
Jealousy blocks learning. Admiration allows it. This principle does not demand indifference to others. It demands clarity. You can acknowledge excellence without feeling diminished. You can respect achievement without craving it. A jealous mind is restless. A clear mind is focused. Modern culture amplifies jealousy relentlessly. Constant visibility, endless metrics, public scoreboards for success. This environment feeds dissatisfaction. Musashi would have recognized it as mental noise, noise that must be filtered out. When jealousy arises, it is a signal, not about others, but about your own direction. It shows where desire and identity have tangled. Instead of indulging it, use it as information. What do you value? What are you neglecting? Where has attention drifted? Then return. Return to your training. Return to your work. Return to your path. A person who walks their own way has no time to envy. They are too engaged. Jealousy fades when purpose is clear. And when purpose is clear, comparison becomes irrelevant. This is why Musashi rejected jealousy completely, not out of virtue, but out of necessity. The way requires undivided attention.
Principle 8. Never let yourself be saddened by a separation. Separation is unavoidable. People leave, paths diverge, roles end, life rearranges itself without asking permission. Most suffering around separation does not come from loss itself, but from resistance to impermanence. Musashi accepted separation as a natural movement of life, not something to dramatize, not something to cling against. To be saddened by separation is to assume permanence was owed. It never was. This principle is not about emotional coldness, it is about realism. Attachment creates the illusion that something should last forever. Separation exposes that illusion, and when the illusion collapses, sadness follows. Musashi trained himself to see relationships, positions, and circumstances as temporary by nature, to appreciate them fully without demanding they remain. A warrior who cannot accept separation hesitates to move forward. They linger mentally in places they have already left. That lingering weakens presence. This applies not only to people, but to identities, former roles, past versions of yourself, stages of life. Holding on to them creates unnecessary grief. Musashi lived a life of constant movement. Teachers came and went, opponents appeared and disappeared, shelter changed, companionship faded. Rather than resisting this, he adapted to it. He understood that separation clears space, space for refinement, space for learning, space for new encounters. Sadness often arises from framing separation as failure. A friendship that ends feels wasted. A phase that closes feels incomplete. But nothing is wasted. Every connection leaves residue. Skills learned, perspective gained, limits revealed. Once that value is absorbed, clinging becomes unnecessary. Musashi did not mourn separation because he did not build his identity on external attachments. His foundation was internal. When your stability depends on others remaining, loss becomes destabilizing. When your stability comes from within, separation becomes a transition, not a collapse. Modern culture struggles with this. We romanticize permanence. We idealize endless connection. We equate separation with abandonment. This intensifies suffering. Musashi offers a simpler lens. Everything that arrives will leave. This is not tragic, it is functional. Accepting this reduces fear. You stop gripping experiences tightly. You stop fearing endings prematurely. You engage more honestly, because you are no longer trying to freeze time. This principle teaches emotional maturity, to care without possession, to value without dependence,
to move on without bitterness. Separation does not diminish what was shared, it simply marks its completion. When you stop resisting endings, beginnings appear naturally, and the way continues, uninterrupted.
Principle 9. Resentment and complaint are inappropriate. Resentment is anger that has nowhere to go. Complaint is resentment given a voice. Both arise when reality does not match expectation. Something feels unfair. Someone acts differently than hoped. Life refuses to cooperate. Most people respond by blaming. Musashi refused this response entirely. Not because injustice does not exist, but because resentment weakens the mind. A resentful person replays injury instead of refining action. They relive the offense, they rehearse arguments, they imagine different outcomes. All of this consumes attention, and attention is finite. A warrior who wastes attention on resentment dulls awareness. In life, resentment has the same effect. It narrows vision, it hardens judgment, it turns energy inward in a destructive way. Complaint feels like release, but it rarely solves anything. It creates a false sense of action while avoiding responsibility. Musashi saw complaint as a signal of misdirected energy, energy that should be used to adapt, prepare, or move on. Resentment also assumes entitlement, the belief that things should have gone differently. But life does not operate on fairness, it operates on cause and effect. Musashi aligned himself with this reality. If something happened, it happened. The only meaningful question was, what will I do next? Complaint delays that question. It keeps the mind anchored to what cannot be changed. Resentment also poisons perception. You stop seeing people clearly. You interpret actions through hostility. You anticipate betrayal even where none exists. This isolates you, and isolation built on bitterness is dangerous. Musashi chose self-sufficiency instead. When insulted, he did not internalize it. When wronged, he did not brood. When blocked, he adjusted his path. This does not mean passivity, it means efficiency. If a situation can be changed, change it. If it cannot, adapt. Complaint does neither. Modern culture normalizes resentment. Outrage is rewarded. Victimhood gains attention. Complaint becomes identity. But none of this produces strength. It produces stagnation. Musashi would have seen this as wasted motion. The way requires composure. When resentment arises, it is information, not instruction. It points to unmet expectations, unclear boundaries, unexamined attachments. Address those directly. Do not stew. A disciplined mind does not deny pain, it simply refuses to dwell in it. Resentment fades when responsibility is reclaimed. Complaint disappears when action replaces it. This principle is not about politeness, it is about preserving clarity. The less time you spend resenting what is, the more time you have to shape what comes next, and that is the only direction the way allows.
Principle 10. Do not let yourself be guided by lust or love. This principle does not reject love. It rejects surrendering your judgment to emotion. Lust and love are powerful forces. They narrow focus, they intensify feeling, they distort perception. When they guide action, clarity often disappears. Musashi understood that emotion can override reason faster than any external threat. Lust seeks immediate gratification. Love seeks permanence and union. Both can be meaningful experiences, but neither should be in command. A mind led by lust becomes impulsive. A mind led by love becomes attached. Attachment creates vulnerability. Musashi did not condemn affection, he condemned dependence. When love becomes the center of decision-making, objectivity weakens. You excuse behavior you would otherwise reject. You tolerate imbalance. You hesitate where decisiveness is required. This applies beyond romance. Love of reputation, love of approval, love of belonging. These are subtler forms of the same trap. When identity is bound to being loved, the fear of loss begins to shape behavior. Fear compromises action. Musashi believed that a person must remain whole on their own. Only then can relationships be entered without self-erasure. This principle asks a hard question. Can you care deeply without losing autonomy? Can you feel strongly without surrendering direction? Musashi believed you must, because when love governs choices, the way bends. You move not according to what is right, but according to what preserves attachment. This leads to internal conflict. Duty pulls one way, emotion pulls another. Most people resolve this by choosing emotion. Musashi chose alignment instead. He placed discipline above feeling. Not to suppress emotion, but to prevent it from hijacking judgment. This is especially difficult in modern life. We are taught that love justifies everything, that passion is truth, that intensity equals meaning. But intensity fades. Clarity endures. Musashi understood that relationships change, feelings shift, and desire dissolves. If your direction depends on them, your life becomes unstable. This principle is not about isolation, it is about sovereignty. You can love without being led. You can desire without being controlled. You can commit without abandoning yourself. When emotion is present but not dominant, relationships become cleaner. Less manipulation, less fear, less resentment. Love becomes a choice, not a compulsion. Lust becomes a sensation, not a directive. And your actions remain consistent with your values. This is what Musashi protected, the integrity of the way. Without it, even love becomes a distraction. With it, love can exist without distorting the path forward.
Principle 11. In all things, have no preferences. At first, this principle sounds impossible. Everyone has preferences. Comfort over discomfort, ease over effort, familiar over unknown. Musashi was not denying this reality. He was warning against being ruled by it. Preferences shape expectations. Expectations create attachment, and attachment limits freedom. When you strongly prefer one outcome, one condition, one way of things being, your mind becomes rigid. Rigidity breaks under pressure. A warrior who insists on ideal conditions hesitates when conditions change. Life rarely offers ideal conditions. Musashi trained himself to remain neutral toward outcomes, not indifferent, neutral. This neutrality allowed him to adapt instantly. No preference for victory through one technique, no preference for terrain, no preference for comfort, only responsiveness. In daily life, preferences quietly control behavior. You avoid situations that feel uncomfortable. You resist feedback that challenges you. You cling to routines even when they no longer serve you. Preferences narrow possibility. Musashi saw them as subtle traps. When you say, "I only work well this way," you limit your range. When you say, "I need these conditions to be okay," you hand control to circumstances. This principle does not demand that you erase taste or opinion. It asks that you loosen their authority. You can enjoy comfort without requiring it. You can appreciate ease without depending on it. You can choose without clinging.
A person without rigid preferences moves freely. They are not thrown off by inconvenience. They are not destabilized by change. They are not offended when things unfold differently than expected. Modern life encourages preference as identity. What you like, what you dislike, what you stand for, what you reject. This hardens the self. Musashi preferred fluidity. When you drop strong preferences, perception sharpens. You stop filtering reality through desire and aversion. You see situations as they are, not as you wish them to be. This increases effectiveness. You respond to what is present, not to what you wanted. Having no preferences does not mean lacking standards. It means not being emotionally invested in one narrow expression of reality. You choose what works, not what flatters comfort. This makes you resilient. If something goes your way, you proceed. If it does not, you adjust. No inner resistance, no frustration, no wasted energy. Preferences consume attention. Freedom returns it. This is why Musashi valued neutrality so highly. A flexible mind survives where rigid minds fail. When preferences loosen, the way opens wider and movement becomes effortless. Principle 12. Be indifferent to where you live. This principle is about inner stability, not geography. Musashi was not saying that environment has no effect. He was saying it should not define you. Many people tie their peace to location. If only I lived somewhere better. If only I could move. If only my surroundings were different. This turns place into a condition for well-being. Musashi rejected that dependence. A person who needs a specific environment to feel centered is fragile. Remove the comfort and stability collapses. Musashi lived simply and moved often. Caves, temples, villages, roads. He learned to carry his center with him. This principle asks the same of you. Your clarity should not depend on scenery. Your discipline should not depend on comfort. Your values should not depend on surroundings. When place dictates your state of mind, you are always negotiating with circumstance. That negotiation drains energy. Musashi preferred self-containment. Home was not a structure. It was a mental condition. Indifference here does not mean neglect. It means non-attachment. You care for where you are, but you are not owned by it. You adapt rather than complain. You settle rather than resist. You function rather than fantasize. This creates mobility, not just physical mobility, but psychological mobility. You stop waiting for the right conditions to begin. You begin wherever you are. Modern culture fuels dissatisfaction with place. We compare constantly. We idealize elsewhere. We believe happiness is always located somewhere else. This creates restlessness. Musashi saw restlessness as distraction. A mind preoccupied with relocation cannot fully engage with the present. This principle anchors attention. Where you live is where practice happens. Where you live is where refinement occurs. Where you live is sufficient. If movement is required, you move. If staying is required, you stay. But neither defines you. When place loses emotional authority, resilience grows. You can be calm in discomfort, focused in chaos, disciplined in simplicity. This is freedom. Not the freedom to choose the perfect place, but the freedom to remain steady anywhere. Musashi cultivated this deliberately because a person rooted internally cannot be unsettled externally, and the way remains intact no matter where you stand. Principle 13. Do not pursue the taste of good food. This principle is not about food. It is about restraint. Musashi was not condemning enjoyment, he was warning against indulgence. Food is one of the most basic pleasures. It satisfies hunger, but it also invites excess. When taste becomes the focus, nourishment becomes secondary. Musashi saw this as a subtle form of weakness. A mind that constantly seeks sensory pleasure becomes dull, not immediately, but gradually. When eating is driven by craving rather than necessity, discipline erodes in small, invisible ways. Comfort replaces alertness. Satisfaction replaces readiness. Musashi believed the body should be maintained, not indulged. Fed enough to function, rested enough to recover, but never pampered. This creates sharpness. A person accustomed to excess struggles with scarcity. A person accustomed to simplicity remains steady. Food trains the will more than people realize. If you cannot restrain appetite, you will struggle to restrain emotion. If you cannot tolerate mild discomfort, you will avoid greater challenges. Musashi valued minimalism because it removed dependency. When taste no longer dictates behavior, choice becomes cleaner. You eat because the body requires fuel, not because the mind seeks stimulation. This frees attention. Modern life encourages the opposite. Food as entertainment, food as a reward, food as identity. Constant stimulation dulls appreciation. Musashi chose clarity over indulgence. This principle does not demand austerity. It demands awareness. You may enjoy good food when it appears, but you do not chase it. You do not structure your day around it. You do not let it control mood or motivation. When pleasure is occasional, it remains pleasure. When it is pursued, it becomes dependency. Musashi avoided dependency wherever possible, because dependency creates fear. Fear of losing comfort, fear of inconvenience, fear of simplicity. A disciplined body supports a disciplined mind. Eating simply reinforces that discipline daily, quietly, consistently. This principle is about mastering small urges so larger ones do not master you. When appetite is under control, attention sharpens. And when attention sharpens, the way becomes easier to follow.
Principle 14. Do not hold on to possessions you no longer need. This principle is about clarity, not minimalism for its own sake. Musashi was not interested in owning less to appear virtuous. He was interested in carrying less, mentally and physically. Every possession requires attention. It must be stored, maintained, protected, justified. What begins as ownership quietly turns into responsibility, and responsibility, when unnecessary, becomes weight. Musashi understood that excess objects create excess attachment, not only to things, but to the version of yourself that acquired them. Old tools, old identities, old comforts. Holding on to them is often a way of holding on to the past. This slows movement. A warrior burdened by unnecessary gear moves slower. A person burdened by unnecessary possessions thinks slower. Clutter is not neutral. It fragments attention. You see it every day. You manage it. You step around it. Over time, this dulls awareness. Musashi valued readiness. To be ready, you must be unencumbered. This principle applies beyond physical objects. Habits you no longer need, beliefs that no longer serve, commitments that no longer align. Holding on to them out of familiarity is still attachment. Musashi would have seen this as wasted weight. Letting go is not loss, it is refinement. When you remove what is unnecessary, what remains becomes clearer. You know what matters, you know what is essential,
You know what deserves care. Modern culture encourages accumulation, more options, more backups, more just in case. But more often leads to indecision. When everything is kept, nothing is prioritized. Musashi chose decisiveness. Keep what serves the way, release what does not. This does not require harsh judgment, only honesty. Ask simply, does this support who I am becoming? If not, release it. The act of letting go strengthens discipline. It reminds you that security does not come from ownership. It comes from adaptability. A person who can walk away from excess can also walk forward without fear. This principle trains lightness, lightness of movement, lightness of mind, lightness of identity. When you stop guarding what no longer matters, energy returns. And with that energy, the way becomes easier to carry.
Principle 15. Do not act following customary beliefs. Customs are convenient. They tell you how to behave without requiring thought. They provide scripts. They reduce friction. But convenience is not truth. Musashi warned against acting purely out of habit, tradition, or social expectation. Not because customs are always wrong, but because unexamined customs weaken judgment. When you follow custom automatically, you outsource thinking. You act because this is how it's done, not because it is correct, necessary, or aligned with your direction. A warrior who fights according to habit becomes predictable. Predictability invites defeat. Life works the same way. Custom shapes opinions. Custom shapes morality. Custom shapes ambition. Much of what people pursue is inherited desire. Success defined by others, rules written by tradition, values absorbed without question. Musashi rejected this inheritance. He believed that action must arise from understanding, not imitation. This principle demands discernment. Before acting, ask, why am I doing this? Is it because it works or because it is expected? Is it because it is right or because it is familiar? Custom often survives long after its usefulness ends. What once protected becomes restrictive. What once guided becomes limiting. Musashi lived outside rigid structures, not out of rebellion, but out of clarity. He observed, tested, and chose deliberately. This made his actions unconventional but effective. Modern life is filled with invisible customs. Career paths followed without reflection. Life milestones treated as mandatory. Opinions adopted through repetition. Breaking from custom feels risky because custom offers belonging. But belonging purchased with self-betrayal is costly. Musashi chose solitude over false alignment. He trusted direct experience over inherited belief. This does not mean rejecting all tradition. It means refusing blind obedience. Use what works, discard what does not. Let experience refine belief. A person guided by understanding adapts. A person guided by custom repeats. The way is not static. It requires responsiveness. When you act from clarity rather than convention, your actions become precise. You are no longer pulled by expectation. You are no longer constrained by habit. You move according to reality. This principle protects independence of mind. And without independence, the way cannot be walked.
Principle 16. Do not collect weapons or practice beyond what is useful. This principle is about focus. Musashi was not opposed to skill. He was opposed to excess. Collecting tools feels productive. Endless practice feels disciplined. But without purpose, both become distraction. A warrior who collects weapons without mastery becomes scattered. A person who practices without direction becomes busy, not effective. Musashi believed depth mattered more than breadth. One sword understood completely was more valuable than many owned superficially. This applies far beyond combat. In life, people often accumulate techniques, certifications, tools, and methods. They mistake preparation for progress. They learn endlessly, but rarely integrate. Musashi warned against this. Practice must serve function. If a skill does not sharpen action, it becomes weight. If training does not translate into clarity, it becomes ritual. Ritual feels safe, but safety is not mastery. Musashi trained with intention. Every movement had purpose. Every repetition refined something specific. He did not practice to feel accomplished. He practiced to be effective. This principle challenges modern habits. We over-prepare, over-optimize, over-collect. More gear, more information, more options. But more is not better. More divides attention. A focused mind moves decisively. A scattered mind hesitates. Musashi preferred simplicity because simplicity reveals weakness. When you strip away excess tools, your true level becomes clear. This clarity is uncomfortable but necessary. If something is not useful, it should not be practiced. If a tool is not essential, it should not be owned. This forces refinement. You stop hiding behind equipment. You stop relying on complexity. You develop skill instead. This principle also warns against ego. Collecting tools can become identity. So can endless training. I am prepared. I am advanced. I am knowledgeable. But preparation that never faces reality decays. Musashi tested everything in experience. Only what survived was kept. The rest was discarded. This keeps the way clean. Train what matters. Keep what works. Remove the rest. This creates precision. When action is required, you do not search through options. You act. That is the purpose of mastery. Not accumulation, but readiness. Musashi understood this deeply. Because when the moment arrives, only what is useful remains, and the way reveals itself through action.
Principle 17. Do not fear death. This principle is often misunderstood as grim or extreme, but Musashi was not obsessed with death. He was freeing himself from fear. Fear of death shapes behavior quietly. It encourages hesitation. It encourages compromise. It encourages living cautiously, not fully. Musashi saw fear of death as the root of many weaknesses. A person who fears death clings to comfort. They avoid risk. They delay action. They live defensively. For a warrior, this is fatal. For anyone else, it is limiting. Musashi did not seek death. He simply accepted it. Acceptance removed fear. When death is acknowledged as inevitable, it loses its power to dominate decision-making. You stop bargaining with life. You stop postponing what matters. You stop clinging to what cannot last. This does not make life meaningless. It makes it precise. When time is finite, attention sharpens. You choose more carefully. You waste less energy. You act with intention. Fear of death often disguises itself as fear of failure, fear of embarrassment, fear of loss, fear of instability. But beneath all of these is the same instinct, self-preservation at any cost. Musashi rejected this instinct, not recklessly, but consciously. He believed that a person must live in a way that they do not need to be rescued from their own fear. This creates courage. Not dramatic courage, quiet courage. The courage to act when uncertain, to stand firm when threatened, to move forward without guarantees. Modern life tries to hide death. We avoid thinking about it. We treat it as an interruption rather than a certainty.
This avoidance strengthens fear. Musashi chose the opposite. By facing death directly, he dissolved its grip. When death is no longer feared, life becomes less cluttered. Petty anxieties lose importance, trivial concerns fade, priorities clarify. This principle is not about recklessness, it is about freedom. Freedom from constant self-protection, freedom from fear-based decisions, freedom to live aligned with values rather than survival alone. A person who does not fear death is difficult to intimidate, difficult to manipulate. They cannot be easily pressured into abandoning their path. Musashi understood this. Because the way demands integrity under pressure. Fear erodes integrity. Acceptance preserves it. When death is no longer the ultimate threat, you begin to live deliberately, not longer, but deeper. This is what Musashi protected. Life lived without fear of death is life lived with clarity, and clarity is the heart of the way.
Principle 18. Do not seek to possess goods or land for your old age. This principle challenges one of the deepest assumptions people live by, that safety lies in accumulation, that peace is something you store for later, that security can be owned. Musashi rejected this idea entirely, not because preparation is foolish, but because dependency on the future weakens the present. When your peace is postponed, your life becomes a waiting room. You endure today for a promise tomorrow may never fulfill. Musashi saw this as a quiet form of fear. Fear of uncertainty, fear of aging, fear of losing control. Possessions meant to secure the future often become chains in the present. They demand protection, they demand maintenance, they demand worry. And worry fragments attention. Musashi chose a different investment. He invested in capability, skill that could not be stolen, clarity that could not decay, discipline that did not depend on circumstance. These age well. Land can be taken, goods can be lost, plans can collapse, but judgment, restraint, and self-reliance remain usable until the end. This principle does not condemn material stability. It condemns psychological dependence on it. When your sense of safety rests entirely on ownership, fear governs decisions. You avoid risk not because it is unwise, but because it threatens comfort. You compromise values for security. You delay necessary endings. You cling to situations that no longer serve you. Musashi refused to let the future hold him hostage. He lived as if each phase of life must stand on its own. Old age was not a problem to be insulated against. It was another stage to be met with clarity. This principle trains present strength. If you cultivate discipline now, you will not panic later. If you cultivate adaptability now, you will not collapse when conditions change. If you cultivate independence now, you will not fear aging. Modern life encourages the opposite mindset. Save endlessly. Insure against every possibility. Treat uncertainty as failure. But no amount of preparation removes uncertainty. Musashi accepted this. Rather than hoarding protection, he refined readiness. Readiness to adapt, readiness to simplify, readiness to let go. This creates calm. You stop negotiating your integrity for hypothetical futures. You act correctly now, trusting that clarity will continue to serve you later. This principle is not reckless, it is grounded. It says, build yourself, not a fortress, because fortresses crumble, but a disciplined mind remains functional, in youth, in age, and even at the end.
This is why Musashi placed this principle near the close, because once fear of death fades, fear of the future must fade with it. Only then is the way complete.
Principle 19. Respect gods and Buddha, but do not depend on them. This principle is about responsibility. Musashi was not rejecting spirituality, he was rejecting reliance. Respect acknowledges what is greater than you. Dependence hands over your agency. Musashi drew a clear line between the two. You may honor gods, traditions, or teachings. You may bow to them. You may learn from them. But you must not expect them to act on your behalf. Dependence weakens resolve. When outcomes are placed in divine hands, effort softens. Accountability fades. Discipline becomes optional. Musashi believed that no external force would walk the way for you. Prayer does not replace preparation. Faith does not replace judgment. Belief does not replace action. This does not make life empty. It makes it honest. When you stop waiting for intervention, you begin to take full ownership of your choices. Success becomes your responsibility. Failure becomes your lesson. Musashi respected spiritual traditions because they pointed toward clarity, but he refused to outsource strength. A warrior who expects protection fights differently, hesitant, unfocused, divided. A person who accepts full responsibility moves with precision. This principle applies far beyond religion. Trust in luck, trust in fate, trust in systems to save you. All of these are forms of dependence. Musashi cut through them. He believed that meaning arises from action aligned with understanding, not from hoping things will turn out well. Respect keeps arrogance in check. Independence keeps effort sharp. You acknowledge forces beyond your control without surrendering to them. This balance matters. Without respect, you become reckless. Without independence, you become passive. Musashi held both. Modern life often swings between extremes: blind faith or total cynicism, dependency or denial. Musashi chose neither. He walked a disciplined middle path. Honor what inspires wisdom, but stand on your own feet. When difficulty arises, do not ask why it happened. Ask what must be done. When uncertainty appears, do not wait for signs. Refine your judgment. This principle restores dignity. You are not a pawn of fate. You are not protected from consequence. You are responsible. And that responsibility is not a burden. It is freedom. Because when nothing is promised, everything you achieve is real. This is the kind of strength Musashi trusted: quiet, self-reliant, unshakable. The way does not belong to gods or men. It belongs to those who walk it without leaning.
Principle 20. You may abandon your body, but you must preserve your honor. This principle draws a hard line between what is temporary and what must not be compromised. The body ages, weakens, fails. Musashi never confused the body with the self. It is a vessel, useful, necessary, but impermanent. Honor is different. Honor is alignment. Alignment between what you know is right and what you are willing to do. Musashi believed the body could be sacrificed, but integrity could not. Because once integrity is abandoned, the way collapses. This principle is not about pride or reputation. It is not about how others see you. It is about how cleanly you live with your own actions. Honor here means consistency. You do not betray your values to avoid pain. You do not lie to preserve comfort.
You do not abandon principle to extend survival. This does not mean seeking death. It means refusing to live in contradiction. A person who sacrifices honor to protect the body ends up losing both. They live longer, perhaps, but smaller. Fear governs them. Justification replaces clarity. Self-respect erodes quietly. Musashi understood that some lines cannot be crossed without inner collapse. Once crossed, no external gain repairs the damage. The body survives, but the self fragments. This principle is deeply connected to fearlessness. If you fear death more than dishonor, you will compromise. If you value integrity more than comfort, you remain whole. Musashi lived by this standard. He accepted hardship, isolation, and risk because preserving alignment mattered more than ease. This principle applies far beyond extreme situations. Everyday dishonor is more common. Small lies, quiet betrayals, gradual erosion of standards. These feel harmless in the moment, but they accumulate. Over time, the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be widens. That gap is suffering. Musashi refused to live divided. He would rather lose position than self-respect, rather face consequence than live falsely. This creates inner solidity. When your actions align with your values, fear diminishes. You no longer need to protect a fragile image. You simply act. Modern life often reverses this priority. Preserve comfort, preserve status, preserve safety at any cost. Musashi rejected that trade. He chose coherence over survival. Not recklessness, coherence. When honor is preserved, even loss has meaning. Even defeat has dignity. Even death has clarity. This principle anchors the entire way, because without integrity, discipline becomes hollow. With it, even suffering becomes bearable. You may lose strength, you may lose position, you may lose the body, but if you preserve honor, nothing essential is lost, and the way remains intact until the end. Principle 21. Never stray from the way. This final principle is not an instruction, it is a warning. After discipline is learned, after fear is faced, after attachment is loosened, there remains one danger: drift. Drift does not happen suddenly, it happens quietly. You make small exceptions, you compromise once, you delay what you know should be done. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, but the direction shifts. Musashi understood that the greatest threat to the way was not hardship, it was inconsistency. The way is not something you reach and keep. It must be walked continuously. Every day, choices either align with it or pull away from it. There is no neutral ground. To stray from the way is not to abandon it openly, it is to forget it slowly. You begin to rationalize comfort, you excuse avoidance, you trade discipline for convenience, and because the change is gradual, it feels justified. Musashi rejected this softness. He believed that clarity must be renewed constantly, not through force, through attention. You return to fundamentals, you check your motives, you correct small deviations before they widen. This principle binds all the others together. Acceptance without consistency fades. Detachment without discipline weakens. Fearlessness without integrity becomes recklessness. The way is coherence, between thought and action, between values and behavior, between understanding and movement. To never stray from the way does not mean perfection,
It means correction. When you notice deviation, you return, without drama, without guilt, without delay. Musashi walked alone because it made this easier. Solitude removes distraction, but solitude is not required. Clarity is. You must know what your way is, not borrowed, not inherited, not performed, chosen. Once chosen, it must be protected, not aggressively, deliberately. This final principle is not about achievement, it is about continuity. You do not live the way once, you live it repeatedly, in small decisions, in unobserved moments, in quiet integrity. This is where mastery lives, not in peak moments, but in unbroken alignment. Musashi ended the Dokkodo here for a reason, because all philosophy collapses if it is not lived. The way does not ask for belief, it asks for consistency. And if you walk it without straying, nothing essential is ever lost, even as everything else changes. This is the end of the Dokkodo and the beginning of walking it.
You have now heard all 21 principles of the Dokkodo, not as rules, not as commandments, but as a way of standing in the world. Musashi did not write these words to inspire others. He wrote them to clarify himself. That is why they feel uncompromising. The Dokkodo offers no comfort, no promises, no reassurance that things will work out. What it offers instead is something rarer: self-reliance, clarity under pressure, freedom from unnecessary suffering. These principles are not meant to be admired. They are meant to be tested in disappointment, in temptation, in loss, in moments when no one is watching. You do not need to adopt all of them at once. You do not need to agree with every line. But you do need honesty, because the Dokkodo does not bend to preference. It asks one question only: can you stand without leaning? On pleasure, on approval, on certainty, on hope. Musashi believed that true strength comes from reducing dependency, not becoming less human, but becoming less divided, less reactive, less distracted, less owned by fear and desire. Walking alone does not mean rejecting others. It means refusing to abandon yourself. The world will continue to change. People will come and go. Conditions will improve and deteriorate. The way does not prevent this. It prepares you for it. If you take anything from this series, let it be this: mastery is quiet, consistency is power, and integrity is never negotiable. The Dokkodo ends where it must, not with achievement, but with responsibility. The way is not something you finish listening to. It is something you either live or slowly forget. And that choice is renewed every day. Thank you for walking this far. The rest is up to you.